The trade that vanished overnight. Kawhi Leonard was supposed to be going home, the deal was agreed to, the headlines were ready, and Toronto fans were already imagining another championship run. Then the NBA stepped in and the biggest trade of the offseason vanished into silence. On June 30, the Clippers and Raptors reportedly reached an agreement that would send Leonard back to the city where he delivered a championship. For a few days, it looked complete. Toronto prepared for a reunion. Los Angeles prepared for a reset. Kawhi prepared for a new chapter. But when the moratorium ended, there was no announcement, no press conference, no jersey reveal, just silence, and then the real reason surfaced. The league placed the trade on hold while investigators examined allegations that the Clippers may have used an outside sponsored arrangement to provide Leonard with money beyond normal salary cap rule. At the center was Aspiration, a failed financial company tied to a reported multi-million-dollar endorsement deal with Kawhi. Suddenly, this was no longer just a basketball transaction. It had become a test of the NBA's credibility. The Clippers denied wrongdoing and said they had cooperated fully. Toronto still wanted Leonard, but the Raptors refused to accept the risk of completing a trade that could later be erased by the league's ruling. That left everyone trapped. Kawhi remained a Clipper on paper. Toronto's package stayed frozen. Fans waited while lawyers, executives, and league officials decided whether this was a legitimate endorsement deal or something far more serious. Now, one question hangs over the NBA. If the rules were broken, could Kawhi's contract and the trade itself be wiped away? Tell us where you are watching from. If you believe Kawhi will return to Toronto, comment 1. If you think the deal will collapse, comment 2. Subscribe to the channel because this story is only getting more explosive. Why Toronto still wants Kawhi? Toronto's interest in Kawhi Leonard is not built on nostalgia alone. The Raptors remember what happened the last time he wore their jersey, but they are not trying to recreate 2019 with memories. They believe he can still change the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. That is what makes the frozen trade so painful. On paper, Leonard gives Toronto exactly what it has been missing. A proven playoff scorer who can create under pressure, defend elite wings, and control a game when everything becomes chaotic. Scotty Barnes is the franchise cornerstone, but asking him to carry every late-game possession is a different burden. Kawhi would remove some of that pressure while allowing Barnes to attack as a creator, transition threat, and defensive playmaker. The fit looks dangerous because neither player must dominate the ball on every possession. Barnes can push the pace and punish mismatches. Leonard can operate in the half court, hunt his preferred spots, and close games with patience. Add Toronto's size, physical defense, and developing young talent, and the Raptors suddenly look less like a rebuilding team and more like a serious playoff threat. Kawhi also knows the city, the organization, and the expectations. He once delivered the greatest moment in franchise history, making his possible return one of basketball's most emotional stories. But Toronto cannot let emotion replace caution. The Raptors would be surrendering valuable assets for a player whose contract is connected to an unresolved investigation. If the NBA later invalidated the agreement, Toronto could be left with a damaged roster and no easy recovery. So the Raptors are waiting not because they stopped believing in Kawhi, but because they understand the difference between taking a championship risk and walking blindly into a legal disaster. The $28 million question. At the center of the controversy is one number: $28 million. That is the reported value of Kawhi Leonard's endorsement agreement with Aspiration, a financial company that later collapsed into bankruptcy. Athletes sign major sponsorships all the time, so the payment itself is not the central issue. The real question is how the deal was allegedly structured and what Leonard was expected to do in return. According to the claims that triggered the investigation, Kawhi could receive the money without appearing in commercials, posting on social media, attending events, or performing the public work normally connected to an endorsement of that size. There was no visible campaign that appeared to match the contract's value. Then came the detail that made executives even more suspicious. The agreement could reportedly disappear if Leonard left the Clippers. That clause changed everything. If the sponsorship was independent, why would it depend on Kawhi staying with one specific NBA team? Why would a financial company care whether he played in Los Angeles, Toronto, or anywhere else? To critics, that condition looked less like marketing and more like an extra payment tied to his roster spot. The Clippers and Leonard's representatives denied that interpretation. They maintained that the endorsement was legitimate, that the team did not control it, and that critics misunderstand how private business agreements are written. But investigators are not judging appearances alone. They are studying contracts, communications, payments, and the relationships between everyone involved. The question is not simply whether the deal looked unusual. It is whether it was intentionally designed to move money around the salary cap. If the answer is yes, that $28 million could become one of the costliest decisions in NBA history. The Ballmer connection. The story becomes more complicated when Steve Ballmer enters the timeline. Before Aspiration signed its reported agreement with Kawhi Leonard, Ballmer invested tens of millions of dollars in the company through a personal business entity. Around the same period, the Clippers announced a major sponsorship relationship with Aspiration. Months later, the company reportedly offered Leonard his multi-million-dollar endorsement package. Each move can be explained separately. Owners invest in companies. Teams sign sponsors. Players receive endorsements. None of those actions proves wrongdoing by itself. But when they appear in one chain, investigators must ask whether they were truly independent. First came the owner's investment. Then came the team's sponsorship agreement. Then came the payment arrangement with the franchise star. Critics believe those events form a suspicious pattern. The Clippers insist they are being connected unfairly while ignoring the fraud occurring inside Aspiration. Ballmer has said he did not know the details of Kawhi's private agreement. He has also argued that he lost heavily when Aspiration collapsed, presenting himself not as the architect of a hidden payment system, but as another investor deceived by the company's leadership. That defense matters because the NBA must prove more than poor judgment. To establish salary cap circumvention, the league needs evidence that Clippers officials knowingly used the sponsorship to compensate Leonard for staying in Los Angeles. If messages, documents, or testimony show that team officials helped design the arrangement, the Clippers could face severe consequences. If the evidence only shows that Ballmer introduced two parties and later lost money, the league may struggle to justify its harshest penalties. For now, the Ballmer connection remains the bridge between an unusual endorsement and a possible violation capable of reshaping the franchise. The Clippers fight back. The Clippers understand that this investigation threatens more than one trade. It threatens the credibility of the entire organization. That is why their public defense has remained aggressive and consistent. The team says it did not funnel money to Kawhi Leonard, secretly control his sponsorship, or use Aspiration to avoid the salary cap. Instead, the Clippers claim they were also victims of a company whose leadership misled investors and partners. The organization points to months of cooperation with the NBA. Executives and staff members have reportedly participated in interviews, provided large collections of documents, and allowed investigators to examine internal communication. Their message is simple. A team hiding a deliberate scheme would not willingly open this much of its operation. Leonard's camp has offered a similar defense. His representatives say the contract was a legitimate endorsement, not a disguised basketball payment. They reject the description of it as a no-show agreement and argue that the language resembled other sponsorship deals. Still, cooperation does not erase suspicion. The NBA is trying to determine who knew what, when they knew it, and why the agreement was reportedly connected to Kawhi remaining with the Clippers. The league must also separate fraud committed inside Aspiration from any possible salary cap violation by the team. For Los Angeles, the reputational damage is already real. The injuries, playoff disappointments, enormous expectations, and now this investigation have merged into one uncomfortable judgment about the Kawhi era. If the NBA clears the Clippers, they can argue they were unfairly dragged into another company's collapse. If the league finds intentional wrongdoing, their defense will be remembered as an attempt to protect a system built to beat the rules. The investigation will determine the punishment, but public opinion is already shaping the legacy. Inside the NBA investigation, this is not a quick internal review conducted by a few league employees. The NBA brought in outside lawyers and launched a full investigation into the relationships between Kawhi Leonard, Steve Ballmer, the Clippers, and Aspiration. For nearly 10 months, investigators have followed the money and the timeline. They have reportedly reviewed tens of thousands of pages, examined contracts and financial transactions, and interviewed people from every side. Leonard and members of his business circle have been questioned. Ballmer and Clippers executives have sat for interviews. Former Aspiration officials have also provided information. Even individuals tied to the company's fraud case became part of the process. Investigators are not relying only on public statements. They are comparing testimony against documents and searching for contradictions that could reveal whether the endorsement had a hidden purpose. Commissioner Adam Silver has emphasized that the league must consider the totality of the evidence. The NBA cannot punish a franchise simply because a deal looks suspicious. It must establish what happened and whether anyone knowingly violated the collective bargaining agreement. But the longer the investigation continues, the greater the damage becomes. The Clippers cannot fully plan their future. Toronto cannot finalize a trade it believes could transform the team. Kawhi remains trapped between two franchises while the league decides whether his contract is secure. The other 29 teams are watching carefully. If the NBA allows a questionable sponsorship to pass without consequences, owners could search for similar methods. If the league imposes extreme punishment without proof, teams and the players' union could accuse it of overreach. Silver's decision is not only about Los Angeles. It will draw a line every NBA franchise must respect in the future. The league takes sides. While lawyers search for evidence, the basketball world has already formed its own opinions. Draymond Green focused on the competitive impact. To him, pairing Kawhi Leonard with Scottie Barnes immediately changes how the Eastern Conference should view Toronto. Kawhi's playoff experience, combined with Barnes' versatility, could create a dangerous two-way foundation. Kyle Lowry's reaction carried a different weight. As Kawhi's former championship teammate and a Raptors icon, every word he used was examined for hidden meaning. A reference to Toronto's aspirations became part of the drama because the failed company at the center of the investigation shared the same name. Then came the harsher criticism. Media voices used the scandal to reassess Kawhi's Clippers tenure. The injuries, playoff disappointments, and expectations were placed beside the investigation, creating an argument that the Los Angeles experiment failed both on the court and behind the scenes. But not everyone joined the attack. Some players defended Leonard, reminding fans that allegations are not proof and that endorsement agreements can be complicated. Their support exposed a divide. Some see a superstar receiving special treatment, while others see a player being judged before the evidence is complete. Even Drake's early welcome back message became part of the story. It captured how certain Toronto appeared that the reunion was real before the deal suddenly froze. These reactions shaped the atmosphere around Kawhi. Even if the NBA clears him, the suspicion may follow. If the league punishes the Clippers but not Leonard, critics will ask why the player at the center of the payment escaped consequences. The trade may be frozen, but the debate is moving at full speed. By the time the ruling arrives, the NBA may be too divided for any result to feel completely fair. The punishment that could change everything. If the NBA concludes that the Clippers deliberately used an outside company to move money around the salary cap, the punishment could be far more destructive than most fans realize. This would not be treated like a minor paperwork mistake. Salary cap rules exist to stop wealthy owners from secretly offering benefits that other teams cannot match. If the league believes those rules were intentionally broken, Adam Silver would face enormous pressure to send a message strong enough to discourage every other franchise from attempting something similar. The Clippers could receive a multi-million-dollar fine. Executives or employees who knowingly participated could be suspended for months, possibly an entire season. The league could also take away future draft picks, which would damage Los Angeles long after Kawhi Leonard is gone. For a team already facing an uncertain future, losing draft capital could turn one scandal into years of consequences. But the most dangerous possibility involves Kawhi's contract itself. If investigators determine that the reported endorsement payment was actually connected to Leonard's agreement with the Clippers, the league could argue that his playing contract was built on an illegal arrangement. Under the harshest interpretation of the rules, that contract or transactions connected to it could potentially be voided. That possibility explains Toronto's caution. The Raptors may desperately want Kawhi back, but they cannot surrender major draft assets and young players while the foundation of the deal remains unstable. If Toronto completes the trade and the NBA later invalidates Leonard's contract, the Raptors could be left fighting to recover everything they gave away. It would be a nightmare scenario. Toronto builds its season around a superstar, fans celebrate his return, and then a legal ruling destroys the entire plan before he plays a meaningful game. There is also no guarantee that Silver's first decision would end the story. The Clippers could appeal through the league's arbitration system. The players' union could become involved if it believes Leonard is being punished without sufficient evidence. That could turn the investigation into a long legal battle involving the league, the franchise, the union, and one of the NBA's biggest stars. The NBA might attempt to divide responsibility. It could punish the Clippers and certain executives while deciding there is not enough proof that Leonard knowingly participated. That outcome might allow the Toronto trade to continue, but it would create another controversy. How could the team be guilty of arranging an improper payment while the player receiving it walks away without major consequences? Whatever happens, the ruling will become a warning to every owner, agent, sponsor, and player. This is no longer only about Kawhi Leonard. It is about how far teams can go to attract stars and what happens when ambition crosses the line into possible deception. 3 possible endings. There are 3 realistic ways this story can end, and every one of them could reshape the future of Kawhi Leonard, the Clippers, and the Toronto Raptors. The first ending is complete clearance. The NBA finishes its investigation and determines that there is not enough evidence to prove intentional salary cap circumvention. The league may still criticize the structure of the endorsement agreement, but no major punishment is issued. The Clippers and Leonard are cleared of the most serious allegations, and the frozen trade is finally allowed to move forward. Kawhi returns to Toronto, where fans welcome back the player who delivered the franchise's greatest championship moment. The Raptors pair him with Scottie Barnes and immediately become one of the most dangerous teams in the Eastern Conference. For Los Angeles, the clearance would offer relief, but not complete redemption. Even without formal punishment, the investigation would remain part of how people remember the Kawhi era. Questions about the endorsement, Ballmer's investment, and Aspiration's collapse would not disappear overnight. The second ending is a split verdict. The NBA decides that Clippers officials acted improperly or failed to maintain the necessary separation between the team, the sponsor, and Leonard's private business agreement. Los Angeles receives a large fine, loses draft picks, or sees executives suspended. But the league determines that there is not enough evidence to prove Kawhi knowingly participated in a scheme. In that scenario, Leonard could still complete the move to Toronto. The Raptors would get their superstar, while the Clippers would absorb most of the punishment. Basketball fans might accept that result, but the controversy would become even louder. Critics would ask whether the NBA protected a star while making the franchise take the fall. Others would argue that punishing Leonard without direct proof would be unfair and legally dangerous. The third ending is total collapse. The league finds serious violations and rules that Kawhi's contract or the proposed transaction cannot stand. The trade is canceled. Toronto keeps its assets, the Clippers enter a full crisis, and Leonard's future becomes uncertain. That would be the most damaging outcome for everyone. Toronto would lose a player it had already begun imagining as the final piece of a championship roster. Los Angeles would be forced to explain how a partnership that began with championship expectations ended in injuries, disappointment, investigations, and a destroyed transaction. Kawhi would face the most uncertain chapter of his career. Instead of preparing for a return to Toronto, he could be waiting for arbitration, contract decisions, or a completely new agreement. There is also a fourth possibility hiding between these outcomes: delay. The NBA could continue reviewing evidence while the season approaches, leaving both franchises trapped. Toronto would be unable to commit fully to a new roster. The Clippers would have a player they expected to trade. Kawhi would remain caught between two teams, two futures, and one unresolved investigation. That may be the most frustrating result of all. A clear punishment can be challenged. A cleared name can move forward. But uncertainty slowly damages everyone involved. The final decision belongs to Adam Silver and the investigators. One ruling could complete one of the most emotional reunions in modern NBA history, or erase it before Kawhi ever steps onto the floor in a Raptors uniform again. The decision that could reshape the NBA, the Kawhi Leonard investigation, began with one unusual endorsement agreement. But it has grown into something far bigger. A test of whether the NBA can protect competitive fairness while still respecting evidence, due process, and the rights of everyone involved. For Toronto, the strategic lesson is clear. The Raptors are right to remain patient. Bringing Kawhi back could transform their basketball future, but a front office cannot allow emotion to control a franchise-defining decision. The memories of 2019 are powerful. The possibility of pairing Kawhi with Scottie Barnes is exciting, but Toronto must know that the player, the contract, and the transaction are legally secure before surrendering valuable young talent and draft assets. Championship teams take risks, but they do not ignore warning signs. For the Clippers, this case exposes the danger of relationships that appear too closely connected. An owner investing in a company is not automatically suspicious. A team signing a sponsor is normal. A player receiving an endorsement is also normal. But when the owner, the sponsor, the team, and the franchise player become linked through enormous financial agreements, complete transparency becomes essential. Even if the Clippers are ultimately cleared, the organization must learn that appearances matter in a league built on trust. Teams are not only responsible for following the rules, they must also avoid business structures that make those rules appear meaningless. For Kawhi Leonard, the lesson is more personal. A player's legacy is shaped by more than championships and statistics. Business decisions, representatives, contracts, and public silence can all become part of the story. Kawhi may believe he did nothing wrong, and the investigation may eventually support him. But until the ruling arrives, this controversy will remain attached to his final days in Los Angeles and his possible return to Toronto. The NBA also faces a difficult responsibility. If the evidence proves deliberate wrongdoing, the punishment must be serious enough to protect the league's credibility. A weak response could encourage other teams to create their own indirect payment systems through sponsors, investors, or business partners. But if the evidence is incomplete, the NBA must resist the temptation to punish someone simply because the story looks suspicious. Public anger is not the same as proof. Fairness requires patience, consistency, and a willingness to separate uncomfortable appearances from confirmed violation. The most humane lesson is that disagreement should not become hatred. Fans can question the Clippers. They can criticize the structure of the deal. They can debate Kawhi's responsibility. But allegations should not be treated as convictions before the investigation is finished. Basketball is built on competition, but justice must be built on evidence. Now, the entire league is waiting for a decision that could complete Kawhi's return, destroy the trade, punish one of the NBA's richest franchises, or create a legal fight that lasts deep into the season. Where are you watching from? Comment 1 if you believe Kawhi Leonard will finally return to Toronto. Comment 2 if you think the investigation will destroy the deal. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with other NBA fans, because the final ruling may not only decide Kawhi's future, it could change how every NBA team does business.